The reason people secretly hate you is because you dared to stop being useful. Not cruel, not rude, not unkind, just useless to their control. And in a world addicted to validation and comfort, your refusal to be used is the ultimate act of rebellion. Have you ever walked into a room and felt a shift subtle but unmistakable? A cold glance, a clipped tone, a conversation that dies the second you arrive. You smile, you're polite, you've done nothing wrong, and yet you feel it. That invisible resentment breathing under the surface. You tell yourself it's in your head, but it's not. It's real. And it has nothing to do with who you are and everything to do with who you're becoming. Because the moment you stop being emotionally accessible on demand, the moment you stop explaining yourself, softening yourself, shaping yourself to fit the fragile comfort of others, they feel it. They feel the loss of power. They feel your emotional detachment as a threat. And instead of saying it, they show it with silence, with sarcasm, with passive aggression disguised as kindness. This is the price of becoming untouchable, not in ego but in sovereignty. When you begin to operate with inner power instead of outer approval, you break the contract they never said out loud but always expected you to obey. The contract that said, be nice, be available, be manageable. Break that, and you break the illusion that kept them comfortable. This video is not for those seeking to be liked. It's for those ready to be respected, feared if necessary, and finally free. If you've ever wondered why your silence unnerves them, stay with me. The answers will not comfort you, but they will liberate you. The real reason they resent you is because you stopped apologizing for being real. You didn't betray them. You didn't lie. You didn't cheat, manipulate, or insult. All you did was change. You grew quieter, sharper, less available. You stopped filling every silence with comfort. You stopped nodding when you disagreed. You stopped shrinking when you entered a room. And that was the moment everything shifted. They won't say it, but you'll feel it. In the side glance, the fake praise, the slow fade from your inbox, the tension that wraps around every conversation even though no one admits it. You'll ask yourself, what did I do? You'll replay it in your head like a crime scene, but there's no weapon, no evidence, because the crime wasn't what you said. It was what you stopped doing. You stopped playing your part in the unspoken contract, the one they never said out loud but always expected you to obey. Be nice, be predictable, be easy to manage. That was the deal. And when you broke it, when you started choosing your peace over their comfort, you became a threat. Here's the truth. No one will tell you. People don't hate you because you're wrong. They hate you because you're uncontrolled. Because they can't predict your reactions, can't manipulate your guilt, can't use your kindness as currency. Your boundaries expose their dependence. And now every time you say no, they hear it as judgment. Every time you go quiet, they feel accused. Every time you show strength, they feel weak in comparison, and they'll blame you for it. This is what happens when you shift from emotional servitude to emotional sovereignty. When you stop asking for permission to be whole. When you begin to embody the Machiavellian mindset, not through cruelty, but through clarity. But ask yourself, why do you still feel the need to explain yourself? Why do you fear being misunderstood by people who were never interested in truly understanding you? Why does their passive withdrawal make your chest tighten even when you know you did nothing wrong? Because you've been conditioned to equate approval with safety, to believe that being liked is proof of your worth. But that belief is a trap. And in this video, I'll show you why their silent resentment is not a threat to fear, but a signal that you've become powerful in ways they can't handle. Not because you hurt them, but because you no longer let them use you. Stay. Watch closely. Because once you understand this, you'll never chase their approval again. You've been taught that the world rewards kindness, that being agreeable, supportive, and selfless is the formula for connection. You were told to smile more, to be easy to talk to keep the peace, to be the bigger person. And for a while it worked. People liked you. You were the helper, the fixer, the one who never made things awkward, the one who always said sure even when you meant no. But then something shifted. You pulled back just a little. You started taking longer to respond. You stopped over-explaining. You said I can't instead of inventing an excuse. And the response, it wasn't gratitude. It was silence, coldness, distance. You didn't lash out. You didn't betray anyone. All you did was reclaim your time, your space, your mind. That was your first contact with the truth. Most social approval is conditional. It's built on an unspoken agreement. You give up pieces of yourself to stay inside the circle. You stay relatable, predictable, safe. The moment you stop appeasing, you become a disruption. And the most insidious part, they don't even realize they're doing it. Their discomfort feels justified. But it's not you they resent, it's the mirror you've become. You reflect what they don't want to see, that their approval was never unconditional, that your kindness was never free, it was taxed by expectation. You were never truly liked. You were tolerated as long as you played the role. And now that you've stepped out of that role even slightly, you've disrupted the ecosystem. You've violated the emotional contract that said, make me comfortable and I'll let you stay. But you're not here to be tolerated. And you're not here to keep the peace at the cost of your own clarity. Ask yourself, how many of your friendships are built on mutual truth? And how many are just silent negotiations? Who stays close to you when you speak freely? And who only comes around when you're easy to manage? These questions aren't comfortable, but they're essential. Because the truth is, you were trained to be useful, not authentic. And now that you're stepping into emotional honesty, they don't know what to do with you. You're no longer the safe one, the always available one, the yes person. You're becoming a person with gravity, boundaries, silence, and that unsettles those who depended on your compliance. You are not imagining the shift. It's real. And it's not because you're wrong, it's because you're finally unafraid to be seen without a mask. They can no longer predict you. They can no longer extract from you. And in a world built on emotional transactions, your refusal to perform feels like rebellion. Let them feel it. You are not here to serve their comfort. You're here to reclaim your presence. And this is just the beginning. They don't punish you for being wrong. They punish you for being unavailable. There's a moment, quiet and visible, when everything changes. You say no, and suddenly you're no longer safe to them. You've broken character. You've rejected the silent contract they were feeding on. You said no, and now you're different. Now you're cold. Now you're hard to talk to. But here's the truth. You're not the villain. You're just no longer manageable. It starts with a subtle shift. A conversation ends quicker than usual. A group text goes quiet. A tone becomes clipped. You think you're overreacting. You try to explain, to clarify, to soften the edge. But the more honest you become, the more distance you feel. And that's the paradox. The more real you are, the more people withdraw. Why? Because your no unmasks them. It reminds them they never truly respected you, only your compliance. The praise they gave you was conditional. The kindness they offered was transactional. Now that you're setting boundaries, they feel betrayed. And they call that betrayal your change. But the only thing that changed was that you stopped abandoning yourself to keep them comfortable. You start noticing things you didn't see before. How often they only checked in when they needed something. How quickly they labeled you difficult the moment you stopped solving their emotional mess. How they praised your empathy until you used it on yourself. Now you're selfish. Now you think you're better. But you don't. You're just no longer willing to be used. And this is where it gets dangerous. Because the people who once smiled at you will now subtly punish you. Not with direct confrontation that would require honesty, but with absence, gossip, passive withdrawal, microaggressions disguised as concern. They don't say, "You're not giving me what I want anymore." Instead, they say, "You've changed." And suddenly you're the problem. It's disorienting. You start to doubt yourself. Was I too blunt? Was that boundary too harsh? Should I have explained more? Should I have softened it? But every time you ask that, you forget something vital. You didn't cross their boundaries. You finally enforced your own. Ask yourself, why does their discomfort weigh more than your truth? Why does their approval still echo louder than your peace? That echo, that fear, is the product of years of conditioning. And breaking it will feel like betrayal. You will feel alone. You will feel misunderstood. You will question your worth. But listen carefully, this isn't the breakdown, it's the breakthrough. Because the moment you say no and stand still without guilt, without apology, you activate something few ever master: self-respect without permission, and they will hate you for it. Because you've shown them who's really in control. Not them, not their guilt, not their silence. You. This is where it begins. The isolation, the tension, the unspoken war. Let it come. Because the moment they can no longer bend you, you become dangerous. The greatest manipulation you'll ever face is being taught that your goodness must cost you everything. You've been lied to. Not once. Not in passing. But from the very beginning. You were trained to believe that being a good person means being agreeable, forgiving, available. That real love is proven through endurance. That if you give enough, tolerate enough, bend enough, you will finally be chosen, safe, understood. But that was never the deal. That was the trap. Because what they called kindness was never about you. It was about what you gave them. And the moment you stop giving, the illusion shatters. Suddenly you're not kind, you're cold. Not patient, you're distant. Not generous, you're selfish. They never loved your soul. They loved your compliance. This is the part no one wants to admit. Most goodness in society is weaponized. Your empathy becomes a leash. Your silence becomes submission. Your forgiveness becomes permission. And every time you stay quiet to keep the peace, you feed their control. Not through violence, but through guilt, through moral blackmail disguised as virtue. They say, you owe us your explanation. They mean we don't want to lose control of the version of you we created. They say you're being cruel. They mean you're no longer emotionally accessible on demand. They say you're not who you used to be. They mean you finally became real, and we can't use that. The system was never built to reward your boundaries. It was built to reward obedience dressed as kindness, self-sacrifice framed as character, and it worked because you believed it made you worthy. But here's the truth. Self-abandonment is not nobility. It is a slow suicide of the soul, and no one will stop you from doing it because it benefits everyone who depends on your silence. Ask yourself, who benefits when you feel guilty for saying no? Who thrives when you over-explain? Who gains when you ignore your intuition to keep the room calm? It's not love. It's not loyalty. It's management. You were conditioned to serve comfort, not truth. Conditioned to apologize for your standards. Conditioned to believe that keeping others emotionally stable is your responsibility. That's not empathy. That's programming. And now that you're waking up, now that you've started to ask questions, now that you've stopped nodding to every request, you're dangerous. Not because you're cruel, but because you've seen the script. You've seen the machinery behind the smiles. And you've realized you were never loved for who you are. You were loved for how well you disappeared. Not anymore. You think you're losing people. But you're actually losing the version of yourself that needed to be accepted by everyone. This is the part no one prepares you for: the silence. Not the silence you create, but the silence that follows when you finally stop explaining, justifying, softening. The silence when you start choosing yourself and suddenly the room feels colder, the phone stops ringing, the invitations fade. People begin to look at you like you've become a stranger. You haven't. You've simply stopped performing, and what's left behind isn't peace, at least not at first. It's raw. It's lonely. It's unsettling. Because you're no longer surrounded by the noise that once kept you numb. The noise of fake intimacy, of forced approval, of relationships built on the performance of who you used to be. Now you're surrounded by truth. You will question everything. Was I too harsh? Should I have explained more? Could I have kept the peace? But the more you sit in that discomfort, the more you'll realize something terrifying. You weren't holding those connections together, they were holding you hostage. The kindness you gave so freely was mistaken for weakness. The availability you offered was interpreted as ownership. And the moment you became scarce on purpose, they treated your peace like betrayal. This is the backlash of becoming untouchable. They will talk about you quietly and with concern. They will frame your absence as instability. They will whisper, "You've changed," as if growth was a crime. They will mourn the version of you that made their lives easier, and they will never admit how much they needed you pliable. But here's the part they'll never say out loud: they respect you more now than they ever did before. Not because you conformed, but because you finally refused to. You're not being cast out. You're walking away from the illusion. And illusions don't die quietly. They cling. They bargain. They guilt. But when you hold your ground, when you stay silent, when you stop flinching in the face of their discomfort, you become something they cannot unmake. You become sovereign. Let them go. Let the silence stretch. Let the discomfort breathe. Because the people who are offended by your boundaries were never there for your truth. They were there for your silence. Now they're gone. And what's left, you, whole, unedited, unapologetic, unshakable. This is not the end. This is your beginning. They didn't leave because you were unkind. They left because you stopped making yourself small for their comfort. You will feel it in your body before your mind can name it. That silence after you say no. That tension in the air after you finally choose peace over performance. The invitations that stop. The conversations that feel thinner. The eyes that once sparkled with validation now look through you like a stranger. It's not rage. It's not betrayal. It's worse. It's emotional exile. No one tells you that the path to self-respect runs through a graveyard of former selves and former relationships. You don't lose people. You lose versions of yourself that were required to keep them. You lose the agreeable mask, the apologetic voice, the edited soul. At first it feels like death, like rejection, like failure, but it's not. It's revelation. The unveiling of how many connections were held together by your willingness to betray yourself. Once you stop explaining, once you stop rescuing, once you stop picking up the emotional slack, they reveal themselves. They don't get angry because you hurt them. They get angry because you stopped letting them use you. And here's the part they will never say out loud. They miss the version of you that gave. Without asking for, gave without hesitation, smiled while suffocating. That version made their lives easy. That version made them feel powerful. That version is now gone, and they don't know what to do with what's left: a person with a spine, a voice, boundaries, sovereignty. But let's be honest, you miss that version too. Not because it was true, but because it kept the room warm. It kept the love flowing. It kept the world smooth. Now everything is jagged, real, unpredictable. But that's the price of freedom, of no longer being defined by who claps when you sacrifice yourself. Ask yourself, how many people in your life were only loyal to your silence? How many loved you when you were performing? And how many love you now when you're finally real? This is not loneliness. It is clarity. You no longer walk into rooms asking for permission. You no longer hand over your peace in exchange for temporary approval. You no longer carry guilt like a birthright. That version of you, the one who needed to be liked, chosen, praised, is gone. Let them grieve it. You don't owe the world your exhaustion. You owe yourself your return. The moment you stop apologizing for who you are, the world starts calling you dangerous. You don't scream. You don't beg. You don't explain. You go silent. And in that silence, something shifts. Not outside you, but inside. That's when you realize you were never asking for acceptance. You were asking for permission to be whole. And now you don't need it anymore. You walk slower. You speak less. You listen deeper. But what you say when you finally do speak lands like thunder. People notice. Not because you raised your voice, but because you stopped lowering your standards. That's the paradox of power. Those who are feared the most often say the least. They will call you hard. Let them. They will call you distant. Let them. They will say you're not the same. And they're right. Because who you were was a performance. Who you are now is free, but freedom comes with a cost. And that cost is clarity. You now see who was never clapping for you, only clinging to your availability. You now understand who loved the version of you that never said no. And you now feel for the first time the full weight of being unedited in a world that profits off your self-doubt. So, here's your choice: return to performance, or stand in your truth no matter how uncomfortable it makes them. Because you cannot be sovereign and submissive at the same time. You cannot lead your own life while being managed by the emotions of others. Let them talk. Let them flinch. Let them walk away. You are not their version of you. You are yours. And that's what they hate most, not your silence, but what your silence says without asking. It says, you've come home to yourself. And you're not leaving again. This is not the end of your story. It's the first chapter of who you truly are. And the people who matter, the ones who won't punish your growth, won't guilt your boundaries, won't mistake your silence for weakness, they will find you. But only when you stop hiding. So if this message really reached you, then say it out loud or write it below. I choose to be whole, even if it costs me everything false. And if you're ready to walk this path, subscribe now. Not for algorithms, but so you never forget that you're not alone on this road. Hit like. Share this with the version of yourself still begging for permission. And let the silence echo where guilt used to live. Because this is your life, and you don't need to explain it to anyone.